the warm-up mixtape. And that was a few months old. And he had a record called Lights Please that was just starting to bubble. And my boss at the time told me, go on the road with J. Cole and don't come back till you've broken him as an artist. And
Wow.
that was my marching orders. And again, I had to your point about Jeremy Shockey, like I had 6 or 7 years under my belt. So I was young enough to be young enough, but old enough to know some of the game,
Right.
which is really important. And that's why it was a perfect time for him to come into my life and my career, because I was at that perfect point of like under 30, but still knew a little bit about the game. And what I learned from him was he and his team asked so many questions. Brian, why are we doing this? Why should we do this? It wasn't, no, I'm not doing this. It was like, I'll do this, but tell me why we're doing this.
I made it through the rough time. I made it through the tough time. I made it through the bad time. So now I gotta get mine. Gotta weather the storm. Gotta get mine. Gotta weather the storm. I gotta get mine. Gotta weather the storm. Okay. One day we gon' get on. Talk to 'em. You ain't got a choice. You gotta notice me living my best life.
Welcome to Bailey and Buck Unplugged, where we talk about sports, entertainment, and mental health in support of the Kennedy Kids Foundation. You know, we like to kick off every episode to remind you, if you're struggling, there's no shame in that. Get help. There's a ton of resources at kennedykids.org on our resources tab. If you're really struggling, we have the 988 crisis suicide line that's available to everybody, or just crisis prevention line. And if you're really in an emergency, dial 911 and get the help that you need. We're all about that here. Just speak up and get help, right? So with that, we're going to have a really awesome episode for you today. I am so excited. So today we are really bringing together sports, entertainment, music, mental health. We have such an awesome guest for you. So really quickly going to introduce you to our host in case you're new here. I am Misty Buck. I'm a mental health and performance coach to the stars and an author. And I'm joined today by Robert Bailey. He is a two-time Super Bowl champion, two-time college national champion. He is an ESPY winner, an NFL record holder. He's also the president of Rosenhaus Sports and the president of the Kennedy Kids Foundation. Today, we are missing our energetic Bailey Brooks Mashburn, but we're going to do our best without her. And with that, I'm going to introduce today's guests. So guys, Brian Nolan, he is the president of global marketing and synchronization at APG, right? This is a music label. Brian, even though maybe you've heard his name, maybe you haven't, but I know you've seen his work, okay? He's been all around for many, many years, from Capitol Records, Motown, right? He's been Arista, BMG. He's worked on campaigns, just, some things for Lil Baby, right? You might have seen his major campaign with Mountain Dew and Migos with that song Position to Win. Who doesn't know that song? That's one of my jams. Go to, right? For sure. So I'm super, super excited to talk to Brian today. Robert, I know you are too. So I'm going to let you kick off our interview today. Welcome, Brian. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for
Glad to
having
have Brian on. Brian, we're excited to have you on. First, let's tell the viewers how you and I met many, many, many years ago when, we didn't really have the executive title behind our name or in front of our name.
It's one of my favorite stories to tell. So I was at Columbia Records, and it was about 2009. I was in radio promotion, and I always wanted to continue to evolve and not just stay in one aspect of the music industry. And one thing that I've always been passionate about alongside music has been sports and the industry around sports. And I saw a growing need to be able to be the centerpiece at Columbia Records for anything sports. And part of that was not just talking to the media companies like ESPN and Turner and Fox, et cetera, in the leagues, but also the representation and the athletes themselves. This was 2009. So this was like a couple years in on Twitter, social media, MySpace starting to happen, and the athletes had their own voice. And so in the spirit of, cold outreach, I emailed the email address on the Rosenhaus Sports website, and I introduced myself, and Robert Bailey responded within 5 minutes. And that was
Sounds like Robert.
Yeah.
And that was,
You know, today I'm the president of the Rosenau Sports, but back then I was manning the emails.
yes, exactly. I facts.
Go
So
ahead.
so that was a start, and we were able to get some things done. I remember Chad Ochocinco was one of the first people that really blew up on Twitter, that you guys were instrumental in, and it's been a 15-year relationship that RB and I have had, and it's one of the relationships that I'm most proud about. And I'm always rooting for everybody at Rosenhaus, and anything affiliated with Robert, I'm always down to support.
I appreciate that. I really do. I you know, like you, man, I'm always looking to step outside the box.
Yeah.
I'm always looking to do something different. I want to go places that no one has gone before. So I was very excited when you reached out to us, because for me, in the marketing space, I saw opportunity. I saw opportunity to put NFL players who absolutely, as a former player, I listen to music on a daily basis. I use music to get me hyped for the game. We as players look up to these music, artists, these rappers, these singers, whoever, whatever genre they're in, we look up to them. So to be able to take this relationship, that, this new relationship, and have my guys be able to meet you and some artists and just be in that world, right? For them, they were like, yeah, wow, I want to go to his office. I want to get some free music. I want to meet I want to meet someone. And for you and your artists, I'm sure for them, they want to meet football players, or they want to be around sports, right? Because everybody loves sports. On Sundays, NFL is on Saturday, college football is on. So I just thought it was a great, a great opportunity to bring the worlds together, and we did. And we some of the guys have come to your office, and it was a great opportunity for them, but also for you. You've made some great connections with, especially when you're in New York with the Giants, with Jesse Armstead, who is still at the Giants, and you guys became really close. As you mentioned, you helped his niece get an internship at Columbia.
That's correct. Yep, that's correct.
And so, that whole the relationship has really, had a lot of positivity for us and for you guys, and obviously in your career, because right now you're flying. And I want to really touch base on that, right? Tell our listeners, if you can go through the timeline of, like, first and foremost, when you were growing up, did you want to be in the music industry, or did you want to be in sports? Because you have that, that love for sports. And did you play a sport growing up? Give the audience a little bit about your upbringing coming up.
Yeah, so I was born and raised just outside Washington, D.C. And so I was very fortunate enough to have a really diverse music background, and listen to a lot of different genres, specifically hip hop and R&B. There's some incredible radio stations in the DC area. And so I was always surrounded by really important culture, growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland, in the DC area. And that kind of got my passion, right? So I had this passion for music way before I knew there was any jobs in the music industry. I loved
Wow.
hip-hop. I loved, I was the one buying The Source when the Power 30 came out.
Oh, wow.
And like studying their names. And
who was your favorite artist, really quick? Who was your favorite artist back then? Your favorite rap group?
Yeah, I would say that was like Wu-Tang and Nas.
Wow.
The early days. LL Cool J was one of my first
that was my favorite
albums.
So were you like the cassette tape recording the talk countdown guy?
Yes, for sure.
I did that.
Yeah, 5 o'clock mix show. And so I had this passion for music, and played sports growing up. Was a big baseball player. Played basketball, tennis, and so sports was always something that I did and was passionate about. And then it wasn't until really my freshman or sophomore year in college where my parents were like, you have to find a path. And that's when I really, focused in on music. and was able to get an internship at Arista Records in their local branch in DC. Back in the day when, they had these major labels had so many different branches because there was physical retail. So you needed to be able to service, your CD shops and your tape shops, which clearly no longer exists today.
Right.
But that Arista internship was my first entry point. And then I landed an internship through Raucous Records, which was the underground hip hop label, home to Mos Def, Talib Kweli, a lot of incredible artists. And that changed my life. I was able to live at NYU in their dorms the summer of 2001, work for Raucous. And that was eye-opening of like, this you can get paid for this.
Right,
you
right.
can make a career about this. And I left New York like 2 weeks before 9/11. And that was when I knew. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to apply for any jobs outside the music industry. And that was the first time I had like tunnel vision, laser focus. I never really had laser focus before then. I was an average, decent student, maybe 3.0 GPA. But once I got exposed to what that was in New York, it was it. And so that got me, to my one-track mind of I'm not going to accept any job. So I graduated with no job, but kept trying these, informational interviews, like going up to saying I worked for free, which my wife now would kill me about, and like doing anything to just get in the door. And then I landed a mailroom job that September. So 4 or 5 months of just grinding, and that took me on my path. And the one thing I got to Sony in 2005, 3 years after I started in the mailroom, and I learned that I needed to continue to pivot. I needed to be an expert in the field, but I didn't want to stay in a field too long to where I would be pigeonholed into whatever that discipline is. Because the one thing about the music industry that you already know, at one point, the places that sold the records were the most powerful. And then at one point, the places that sold the cassettes, and then MTV. So music has a real history of evolving. And if you only stay in one discipline, you're going to put yourself at risk of being disposable. So I've been uncomfortable since really 2008, 2009, when I reached out to you, RB, about like, okay, what's the next thing? And I believe, a lot of people like sports and a lot of people like music. So, but I had a belief that I could do it better. I could connect those dots better than anybody else. And then you also do that for a few years. Then you say, well, I don't want to be known as just a sports guy, because it's also being pigeonholed. So, I did international marketing, and I did sync and brand partnerships and original content, and just always tried to stay ahead of what was possible. And that's been really, advantageous for me.
The next question I want to ask you is for the aspiring music executive, the kid coming out of college, the kid coming out of high school. Since the music industry seems to be always evolving, it's probably the number one industry that evolves the fastest because of technology, right? Football is going to be football. Sports is going to be sports, whatever other, real estate's going to be real estate, food's going to be food. But for music, because of technology, it's evolved. And so, as you mentioned, the record, label, the radio is more important at one point, and the tapes. And what advice would you give a young, kid that has this dream that you had, right? That loves music. What advice would you give them if they wanted to get into the business? Because I'm sure it's far different from what you're doing.
No, totally. I think that it's a great question. I think the first thing I would say is you have to have this like insatiable amount of curiosity and understanding of what moves people to listen to music, what moves people to buy a piece of merch, what moves people to buy a concert ticket, and understand for the music that they like, why do they like it? Why are they passionate about this artist? Because if you're really taking an inventory of your own passion for music, you can learn a lot about fandom, and you can learn a lot about what makes people motivated to spend, money on an artist, or in a world where there's literally over 1 billion choices, why are they picking a certain artist? What does the brand represent? Because I think there are certain things, while music is always evolving, there are certain things that always stay constant. And that is the ability for music to change people's lives, to impact them in a positive way. And that level of understanding what artists are capable of doing that is really fascinating. And when I'm talking to young people, I want to hear that they have a just real curiosity of why things are the way they are. And why is TikTok so important? Or why is Snapchat so important? Or why is this piece of merch that Tyler, the Creator, did so important? Or what are the new genres? Like we have an artist at APG named Odatari who blends the lines between electronic and hip hop and video game music, and using.
Wow.
And it's fascinating, and there's no genre for it. But the kids don't care about what the genre is called in 2025.
Right.
They don't care. They want to listen to what sounds good. And so, not being pigeonholed into genres is also something that we here at APG do very well, because you can learn a lot from everywhere.
Right.
So I would be looking for people who are passionate about the curiosity of the music industry.
But if we get down to the bottom basics, do you recommend they reach out to record labels like you did and just try to get an internship, reach out to independent labels?
Yeah.
Like how does that one guy that says, man, I want to be in this industry somewhere, does he go through radio? What is your
I think there's multiple different entry points. I think there could be things where you see a creator talking about an artist, and you could DM that creator and say, I want to meet with you.
Right.
I think it's way more entrepreneurial than it's ever been because of access. So whatever your entry point, whether you love a certain creator, you might see a campaign and you can Google what artist that label is signed to or management company, and you can find their Instagram page pretty easily.
Right.
And not everybody is as quick as you are being returning, but you have to do outreach. You have to be relentless. You have to do cold emails. You have to take rejection. If like I do a thing where if I meet somebody, I may not reply the first time on purpose, because are they going to follow up? Are they going to, do they really care? Because that's a good way of weeding out the people who just do it because maybe they have a thought one day to reach out about this. So it's that consistency, and seeing something and saying, okay, how do I get to that person? Because now more than ever, you do not need to have a family member or friend in the music industry. You can do direct outreach, and you may end up to a label, independent or major, whatever it may be. But you have to take those steps, because the music industry, while it's very entrepreneurial, it's still small. So most people know each other. So you're able to connect the dots in a way of, if you show value and you want to be, that's my thing. What value are you showing? When I reached out to RB, I didn't say, can you get me tickets to a game? I said, your clients will never have to pay for another CD again. That was the email, right? Yeah. So what value are you providing to the person you're reaching out to? Maybe it's something that I'm a 19-year-old kid and you don't have anyone who's 19 on your staff, and you need to understand our behaviors. So I want to introduce you. Everybody, just because you don't have experience doesn't mean you're at a disadvantage. You have youth, which, I don't have anymore. So it's always finding out what value are you bringing in, and you have to be relentless, because 90% of people are going to do one thing and then hope that it happens. And that's just, you're not going to hear back from me if you just expect one call.
Right. Remember back in the day when you would get in a room with your executive associates and you'd listen to an artist and you'd make a decision on whether you'd sign that artist based on you guys sitting there listening to this guy rap or sing, or some girl rap. That process has changed now, because now you guys have to look at how many followers they have, how many streams have they had. Like these artists are almost without the record label being involved. They're making money already, and they're already what record labels used to bring to the table. they're doing that on their own, at least 40-50%. They're already achieving that on their own. What do you think about the value of the record label, in a sense, going down? Because I hear Jay-Z is now doing something where, you know, record labels, artists are going to get more money. They're going to have more control. Record labels are going to be obsolete, it sounds like. What is your thought on all that?
Yeah, my thought is that there's obviously different parts of artists' careers. And I think the role of a record label has absolutely evolved. And I think the one thing that I would say the good record labels do are how are they able to expand the vision of the artist and scale it in a way that is meaningful. Because if you have a certain ceiling and you have a one-person team, there's definitely heights you can get to. But if your ambition is to scale and to learn and to soak in as much information to apply that to your own career and ultimately your own business, then the right record labels can be a huge asset. And there's also a world in which how are the record labels approaching artists where they can focus on what matters most, which is creating, making music, and focusing on their craft. Because there's a lot of things. If you're spending too much time doing one thing that takes you away from making music, you're not going to be as prolific as you once were.
Right.
So I think there's a clear role of a team, and that team involves the record label. That team could involve the publisher. That team could involve management. That allows the artist to focus on what's important to them and help scale their fan base to a place where they're very globally significant. But it all comes down to what the artist wants. Some artists don't want to scale that wide. They want to build. Or some artists have huge ambition. And if you have huge ambition, just like in sports, you will need a team that you trust.
Right. I hear you, and I agree with that. I'm thinking about a fun question here, and one that I know you have the answer. So, for me, coming into being a football agent, there's always like the journey, and the journey starts with working with my first guy, my second guy, and my third guy until it really starts building up. But along that way, there for me, Jeremy Shockey had the biggest impact on my development. He's the one that had. Wow. He was the most. He really brought me to the forefront of having other people in our industry respect me, right? Because I was making a lot of decisions on his behalf, and he was such a polarizing athlete in New York. I made mistakes, and I also did a lot of great things. But when I think about that one athlete that had an impact on my career, it was a learning lesson. It was a school, and it was Jeremy Shockey. What artist is that for you that really helped you, that you may have connected with, that helped your career and made you really say, man, this artist really impacted my career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was, if I can take everyone back to around 2009, again, I was at Columbia for about 4 years, and Jay-Z had just done the Roc Nation deal with Sony. And through that Columbia Records, there were 3 artists that they brought in to be the inaugural artist as part of the Roc Nation Columbia Sony deal. And one of those artists was J. Cole. And
wow.
I remember the first meeting that we had, Jay was in there, J. Cole was in there. And I immediately, gravitated toward him. And I was still in radio, and that was right around when he had dropped the warm-up mixtape. And that was a few months old. And he had a record called Lights Please that was just starting to bubble. And my boss at the time told me, go on the road with J. Cole and don't come back till you've broken him as an artist.
Wow.
That was my marching orders. And again, I had, to your point about Jeremy Shockey, like I had 6 or 7 years under my belt. So I was young enough to be young enough, but old enough to know some of the game,
Right.
which is really important. And that's why it was a perfect time for him to come into my life and my career, because I was at that perfect point of like under 30, but still knew a little bit about the game. And what I learned from him was he and his team asked so many questions. Brian, why are we doing this? Why should we do this? It wasn't, no, I'm not doing this. It was like, I'll do this, but tell me why we're doing this. And they
Right.
were constantly asking questions. And these were long road trips. Like we're in the middle of Florida, going to Tampa, going to Fort Myers, going to Wichita, all of these markets at the time with radio. And it was a lot of long car rides, listening to
Right.
music, asking questions. And, he was just a few years younger than me, maybe 4 years younger than me. So relative same age, and just an overall wonderful person with a once in a generation talent.
Wow.
And so those first 3 years were not easy. There weren't that many hits. We thought we had some, we thought we had, but we didn't have it. And then, his debut album didn't come for a few years later. And the stress that put on him and his team, of trying to make it and trying to connect was really impactful. And I was one of the handful of people that really spent a lot of time with them. And those 3 or 4 years created a lasting bond that carried on. And even when Rock Nation left Columbia, we still maintained that relationship, still close to him and his team to this day. And what I learned from that, RB, was you don't have to change up who you are as a person to have real success in this industry.
Right.
Wow.
That was my moment of clarity, because I'm looking at the Power 30. I'm seeing people like these icons that don't look like me, that didn't grow up like me. And I'm like, how do I compete with that? And then you just stay in the game and you learn, and you meet artists that are unique and appreciate how you approach things. And I learned from that moment on, in probably 2012, 2013, that you can be your own person, and that's enough. And that has been my mentality ever since then. And it's given me the confidence to approach any situation in an ethical way, in a way that is fair, in a way that will ultimately benefit the artist.
That's awesome, man. That was a learning experience right there for you.
Huge.
Because it sounds like emotionally you connected with them to the point to where, if they were having not a great day, if they were emotionally, depressed because of how sales were going or how things were going, you were connected with that. So I'm sure if they're not having a good day, you weren't having a good day, right? Yeah. Because also you're kind of like the lead guy. They're asking you what's going on, why are we doing this, and you have to deal with that, and it helps your career. Which leads me to my next question, in terms of because we like to get to the mental health of what your industry does for in your industry and what it does. In terms of mental health, going through those ups and downs with that artist on the road all the time, how did that impact you from a standpoint of the mental health? Did you ever go through a time where you said, man, I'm depressed, I don't want to do this, or like how has that impacted you when these guys go through, you get so close to them and they go through this journey where there is a down slope, or you know what I mean, or you got to tell a guy, hey, we're going to move on from you, we're not, we're going to end the contract? Like, how does that impact you when you get so close with these guys?
Yeah, I think it stems from my understanding of, like, I'm always going to keep it solid with these artists, right? Like, there's going to be times I'm giving you good news. There's going to be times I'm giving you bad news. Like, I can't just it's not really a relationship if you're just giving someone good news. And it's not just a relationship if you're giving someone bad news all the time.
Right.
So there's got to be this.
I do the same thing in football.
Yeah.
I always tell, before I sign a guy, and I'm going to let you finish, before I sign a guy, I always say, I'm going to always tell you what you need to hear. It's not going to be what you want to hear. And remember, some of those conversations are going to be tough, and you have to know that it's only for your best interest. So I always, and that's like my disclaimer, because when that time comes, I say, remember 2 years ago when we signed you? Well, this is a moment I have to tell you. So, so I want you to know that I understand when you're dealing with people. So, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I think so. It's one of the, because I never, there's been times when I've been really stressed out, and I think as you get higher and higher up in this industry, the stress certainly is elevated, but you're also able to draw upon your experience and some of your foundation. And so while there have been times that I've felt stressed, I've been able to have a good level of equanimity. And that's a word that we use a lot here at APG, of like staying like this, right? Equanimity is a big word that our founder, Mike Karen, uses, and I've adopted, because you want to be able to deal with the highs and deal with the lows and deal with the 911s and deal with the fire drills, and also be able to understand that you're going to get through this, right? And if you have a level of trust with these artists, and you've proven that trust, and you haven't taken that for granted, you're able to have any tough conversation. And I think it's helped me, because I can get in my head a lot about like thinking, okay, how am I going to deal with this? But if you fall back on the foundation of what your beliefs are and your values, that's very helpful. And I'll also say I'm very grateful to have parents who raised me a way of where I fall back on that a lot about what would my dad in this situation like. And so having that level of conviction in your beliefs has allowed me to maintain a certain level of equanimity, quite honestly, my whole career. And I always try, regardless of I'm having a good day or bad day, I always try to come with the best energy possible, right? And so if you meet me for the first time, or if I'm talking to RB about something, I'm not going to bring my other stuff that's going on into that conversation. I'm going to try to, always find the positive in things. And sometimes I'm optimistic to a fault, but it helps me approach things in a way of like, I'm going to lead here, and I'm going to find the right way. Because if you aren't able to do that, to your point, it's very easy to fall into those traps of thinking the sky is falling and thinking that there's not a way out. But if you have a team that you trust, and if you built those relationships, you can utilize those. And I'll tell you one other thing that's helped me is I ask my mentors, like, what should I do here? Like, let's take a step back. Like, how would you approach this? Like, I'm in a jam right now. Like, I think one of my superpowers is trying to get out of pickles, because I'm always in a jam some way or another. But I don't do it by myself. I ask my wife, like, how would you approach this? She's like, Brian, step back. So I think anytime anybody is in a situation, it always feels heavier than it might be. And so being able to call upon, that's why mentorship is so important. That's why having friends that are your age, that are younger than you, that are older than you, people you can call on, is so important, because if you try to do this yourself, it'll be a tough slog.
Yeah, listen, there's so much about what you just shared that I love, and there's so much to unpack there. So just like, for Robert, he has his passion with football and with sports, and I love all that. And you have your passion with music, and you're clear, and I love all that too. My jam is I'm obsessed with mindset. I'm just like obsessed with mental training and mindset. And so when you talk about things like equanimity, so for those that are listening, understand, to know what that means. It's really not being like let's just say negative or positive, to use two really simple terms, right? It's kind of just like being sort of seeing things right in the middle. So there was a mindset training coach. He's since passed away. His name is Trevor Moawad. And so he would talk about this concept of neutral thinking, which is basically very similar thing. Like, you're not going here, you're not going there. We're just coming back to neutral when things are kind of crazy. And then we're just going to choose our next best step, right? So that was sort of like a very simple way of saying like his whole thing. So I love that you're that your company is so focused on bringing in mental training and mindful tools and things like that, because I was going to ask you how you guys support your artists, because I have to imagine that in situations where you're on the way up, there's pressures, but when when you rise, there's pressures there too,
Yeah.
right? So, and we've heard artists express themselves about mental health. It used to be a little bit more of like an undertone, like back in the day. Tupac, I think, had a lot of that in his songs and what he wrote, and it sort of would be there, but we didn't really label it as mental health. But today it's a little bit more at the forefront. So how are you guys supporting your artist? Well, I mean, we can go either way. I mean, either how you're seeing things change in music, but also how are you guys supporting your athletes with their mental health, with those pressures that you were just alluding to?
So it's a great thing, because I think that more than ever now, the mental health aspect is such a key component of being an artist, because you have social media telling you every single day how bad or good you are.
Yes.
And 25 years ago, it was just a Rolling Stone review that may put you in a dark place if they that review. But now you're seeing thousands and tens of thousands of comments, maybe, where people are saying negative things. And so a lot of the stuff that we do is always provide context about, like, as you scale up, you are going to have more fans, but you're also going to have more detractors. It's just a natural progression of, think about the biggest artists in the world. A lot of those artists are not liked by a lot of people, and they are the biggest artists in the world.
Right.
And so providing examples of artists who have gone through those storms is very, very helpful, because these artists, also these newer artists, need to understand that they aren't the first ones to feel this, and there are ways that you can push through. And that is a major part of having a team that can provide those type of resources for you. I mean, we have.
Do you have a team member that just does that? That's amazing.
We have resources available, and first of all of our team members should be giving examples to our artists about, what certain situations have they seen with other artists they've worked with. How have they gotten through those situations? Do they want to talk to that artist? Providing that level of
the peer support.
Exactly. And we also have support systems at APG where free of charge, the artist can call certain numbers and have conversations around mental health or around financial literacy. And that's something that we are very proud about at APG, because it's a real thing that people need. And again, the bigger you are as an artist, the more haters you are going to have.
Yes.
And it's just the nature of it, and it's never going to change. There's no, the biggest artists in the world have people who don't like that type of music, and they have a platform to tell you they don't like your music.
Right.
So it's,
or they don't like a decision you made in your personal life that they're making a judgment on. Right. I mean, we see. Yeah.
And so how do you as an artist, shield out that noise? Have to have a strategy and a team to understand that this is what it's going to take. And it goes back to mindset. It goes back to being able to focus on what's important. And if you give weight, if you give power to those people, then that will affect you. And if you don't give them power, you will be able to focus on your things that matter the most, which is creating music for the fans that change. These artists have changed people's lives. And understanding that that's the more important thing, and not the bot in whatever city in whatever country telling you that. If you're placing equal value on that comment versus someone's life who's changed, that's not a good way to go about understanding your career. However, these are real issues that these artists go through, and you can't minimize the impact that social media and comments have had on artists. It's extremely significant.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because the human brain is hardwired to look at the negative or think about the negative. So it's like one negative experience, you'll think about that and it'll be stay with you more than like 10 amazing positive
Totally.
experiences, right? Like and the nature I think of being an artist is that you want to make people happy. You want people to like you. And but there's a saying that I love, I'm sure you know it. It's something like they've never erected a statue of a critic. And I
Right.
love that one because it's just like, I think it's such an important reminder of like,
Yeah.
like everyone can be a critic, but who
Yeah.
else is doing what you can do?
Right.
And that's why developing a live touring business is so important because you're able to see your fans. You're able to see your fans. And when an artist sees their fans sing their song in a country that does not speak English, that is some of the most powerful energy you can ever experience. And so if you're able to see firsthand the impact that you're making, that is extremely gratifying. And that will be able to hopefully outweigh the negative. It takes 2 seconds to write a shitty comment on someone's Instagram, but the impact that a fan has had of buying a ticket, buying a piece of merch, wearing that proudly, that's weighted in a different way, that will live with these fans forever.
Right.
One thing I want to add, there's a few artists that have really come out and talk about their mental health. There's also some that travel with a therapist. They actually travel when they're on tour with a therapist to the point where they need to see the therapist before they even go on stage. Are you seeing more of that? Have you dealt with that? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what do you need in a team to make you successful, right? And if that's something that's important to you, it's worth the money to have that person on with you at all times. You hear about the trainers, the physical trainers, or the yoga teacher, or whatever it may be. Meditation for a lot of people is important. That's something that I myself started doing recently, because there's so much noise, and how am I able to level set myself before I walk in the door to be my best self at work and at home? So I think those things are becoming more and more common, RB, because they understand what they need in their team to run. Because if you're doing a 40-city tour, that is a straight grind. It's a grind. It's lonely. It's monotonous. It's boring outside of 2 hours a night.
That's got to have an impact on your mental health. It's definitely got to have an impact.
Huge impact, because it's very lonely, and it's not glamorous, and but you got to put the work in, and you got to, that's why that work ethic is so important. When you talk about earlier, what do you look for in artists? When we're evaluating artists, work ethic is right up
part
there
of
with
that.
talent. Yes, and some artists are just brilliant at outworking, just like athletes. And those are the ones, and at the tippy top, all of those A-level artists have insane work ethic. There's no one who's lazy at the top, because it's not possible. So to be able to pull off 2-year global tours, and what comes along with that. So anybody who knows they need certain things to operate, they should be have a solution for them on their team.
Right. Well, you hear it here, from a executive that's been in the game for a long time, guys. If you want to be an artist, you want to be a rapper, a singer, you have to have a serious work ethic and passion. For everyone out there that's listening, if you want to be in the entertainment business, you have to be passionate about it. But also you have to, take care of your mental health. Brian, do you take your work home with you, or do you leave the office and leave work at the office? Are you a guy that takes it home?
I definitely, it's so funny you asked that question, because my father, who passed away about 5 years ago, one of the things when I was talking to people, and when he passed, I wrote, the one thing I was so grateful for him is I never knew what kind of day he had at the office. And I came home and he was rock solid. And I have found that to be the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to improve, but I certainly could do a better job of not taking certain energy home or worrying about things, because the phone allows you to constantly be on, right?
It's a
And
different,
so,
yeah. Yeah.
and I have a almost 6-year-old, and my wife and I have been married for almost 20 years, so she's seen the whole journey, and that's something that I'm trying to get better at, but it is very hard to do. And I think about my dad all the time about like, how did he do that? Because and I think now with technology, you're more connected than ever. So you have to
Right.
put more emphasis on putting the phone down,
Yeah.
or being present. Because let me tell you, those kids know. My son knows when I'm on my phone, at 8 o'clock at
Yeah.
night. He's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He's years old. So your partner will know. The 5-year-old knows.
Also the industry that you're in. You're in the industry where you're dealing with people. You're dealing with, and most of the people that you deal with is like me, the same people I deal with. They're in their 20s. They're young.
Yes.
And they don't understand that, hey, it's 9 o'clock at night. Don't call Brian. Don't call Robert. They don't care. They're calling. Or they're in the studio and it's midnight, and that's when they're starting their work, and they're calling you because they got a question and they don't even
Yeah.
So, but for you and I, we both a part of our success is the grind.
Yes,
And I feel like I need to be available, because that's how I got 10 toes to the street. I got my fingers in there, and I like being a part of the pulse of the community. So for me, that's also been a struggle in just trying to, when do I put the phone down? When do I stop? When do I turn my brain off from work to family life, right? And I'm trying to. I've been working on that for as long as you've known me. I've been working on that aspect, because that's what made me successful in football.
Yeah.
Like on off days, I would go into work on off days when other guys were home. I would go to the facility to look at film, to work out, to talk to my coach, made sure they saw me, I was like, I'm going to make sure I'm always crossing my T's, checking my boxes, dotting my I's. And for you, the same way, you feel like a part of the success of your musicians is also in what you do for them. So it's hard to turn that off.
Agreed. I think it's just the and the last thing I would say is just your reputation is like your 401k. Like, it just compounds. So if you're constantly if you're constantly saying, having these relationships and building trust, then that is going to be, set in other rooms that you're not in. You're just like when you're sleeping, the money's working for you. When you're somewhere else, if you develop that reputation and grind and consistency of day in, day out, staying solid, having equanimity, then you'll look up and you'll be 20 years in and you'll be like, okay, there are some opportunities that I've been working toward that could come to fruition because of how I approached March 10th, 2015 is the same way I approach.
My birthday's
today.
March 10th. I like that date.
There you go. It's that level of consistency, and maybe taking that phone call that no one else is going to take, or going into the office. I'm like, I drop my son off at school every day, and and so you're waking up at 6 a.m. Maybe people aren't waking up until 7:30. So as you get older, you have more responsibilities, and how do you balance that, but also maintain that level of grind and consistency and curiosity, so that you don't become outdated in an industry where you have to be young.
Yeah, I think it's really, so I love this conversation that we're having. I think I have found personally that it's really important to take what I call pockets of peace. So because the availability is so important, right? And that just becomes, as more technology evolves, we have more time, which means we fill it with more things, and right. So as we create these pockets of peace, so even in with meditation, if you don't have time for a full 30-minute meditation, you can do a 60-second, 30-second breathing technique here or there, right? So but I love the idea of pockets of peace, like that. Maybe that works for me. Maybe it'll work for some of our listeners too. So
Totally.
just putting my at dinner time, my phone goes in another room. If I go on a walk with my husband and my son, sometimes I don't even take my phone. So just like little
Yep.
pockets, like little pockets.
Yep.
That's great.
So yeah, it might be helpful to people, to you guys or people out there listening. But
Totally.
Brian, I know you got to go. You have a million people to go help. You got to put that cape on, go do what you do. We want to thank you for being here and thank you for helping us support Kennedy
Yes.
Kids.
I do have one question. I can't let Brian get
Yeah.
off right now.
All right, well, he's got
I
like
just
60
wanna hear
seconds, Robert.
I got it. It's gonna be fast. Brian, in your industry, I gotta ask you this question because fans will want to know.
Yeah.
Who are your top 5 rappers of all time? The Brian Nolan top 5 rappers of all time.
Top 5. I'll say Jay-Z. This is in no specific order. No specific order.
I want specific order. I want 1 through 5. I want 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Who is 5?
All right, I'll say 5 is Lil Wayne. 4 is J. Cole.
Wow.
3 is Nas. 2 is Biggie, and 1 is Jay-Z.
Wow. All right. You guys heard it. That's the Brian Nolan top 5 rappers of all time for the new generation. You got to go back to hear some of those rappers. Nas is higher on my list, but thank you again, Brian. We appreciate it coming on and sharing some of the inner happenings in your industry and how you can get into the industry and some of the mental health situations that you've seen and how you handle it. But we're glad you've come on the Bailey and Buck Unplugged podcast, and we appreciate you and thank you again. And until next time, my brother, I love you.
I appreciate it. I'll leave the audience with one extension to extend the olive branch. My Instagram is bnolan45. So if you want to reach out, if you're an aspiring music executive, or if you want to make a connection, I'm always down to pass the baton. So reach out, and I'm always looking for people who have a passion for curiosity in the music industry, and a lot of people open doors for me. And one of the things that I want to do in my time, as long as I have here, is to keep that door wide open for people who are passionate and who want to put the work in. So appreciate
that says a lot. That says a lot about your character, Brian. Thank you. That says a lot about your character, and that's why I fucking love you. You are always willing to help. I love helping people, and the fact that you just did that says a lot about you, and I hope people understand when they reach out to you, be ready to go, be serious, be passionate. That's what you're looking for, passionate, hardworking people. Thank you again, Brian. We love you. God bless you. Good talking to you.
Talk to you guys.
But everything is lovely when the sun is out. We trying to have a good time is what I'm talking about. Cookouts, barbecues, and the fish fries. Blue lights, basement parties, I ain't never lied.